Hey everybody, it's Dak here from the Ed Boys, and welcome to my Day 1 Yama guide. It's only been less than a day when making this guide, so I will revisit a full in-depth Yama guide in the future when I get more KC, I get the fight down a little bit more, and also Jagex tends to make some adjustments to the boss in the first week or two. The boss is designed for duos, but it is soloable as well. There's not that many different mechanics from duo to solo. Basically, one of the two players on the team needs to know how to do like the glyphs, and then the other teammate can mostly DPS. So we'll kind of be focused on like the solo aspect and knowing how to do all of the fight, but we'll talk about how things are different in duos. The only flat requirement for the boss is completing a Kingdom Divided quest. You're going to want high stats, like 90 plus magic and melee stats, mostly magic at the moment. I'm sure you can get away with lower stats, but as always, the higher the better, especially with a new endgame boss. The rest of the requirements are more gear related, so let's go ahead and talk about that setup. Magic seems to be the way to go for gear at the moment. It is weak to magic, and then Slash does pretty well, but it's a lot easier to survive when you're standing far away from the boss so that he doesn't have to use melee. I do have a small melee switch though, as there's time that you have to use melee attacks for a small bit. I do think as people get to use the Oathplate armor and the Soul Flame horn that Slash is going to be a lot more useful here, and in the long run we probably will use more melee than we currently are, but for learning the boss I do suggest mostly using magic. The Purging Staff is very powerful here. I used a Shadow for my first handful of kills, but the Purging Staff has only been like slightly slower overall. That's when using Mark of Darkness and Dark Demon Bane on the Arceus spellbook. If you don't have a Purging Staff, the Blue Moon Spear can autocast Arceus spells, which is helpful for KOing the Void Flayers. It's not quite as good as the Purging Staff. If you're in a duo kill, then both players get to use magic on the Flayers, and it's not as important to be able to two-hit them. So for my full setup here, we do have an Ancestral Hat, an Imbued God Cape, the Occult Necklace, Rada's Blessing 4, the Purging Staff, Ancestral Top and Bottom. I do have a fixed Elidnus' Ward, the Tormented Bracelet, Eternal Boots, and a Magus Ring. In the inventory, I do have a bit of a melee switch with the Ember Light, Amulet of Rancor, and the Avernic. You don't actually need like a lot of DPS with your melee switch, but the Ember Light's pretty good. And I do like the Voidwaker specs, though at the moment I definitely am not getting the most out of these specs that I could, but I do like them currently. I do have an Imbued Heart for the bonus mage levels. This is clearly not a requirement, but it is very powerful. We have some Super Restores and a Sanfu Serum. You can be poisoned in this fight, similar to like fighting Zamorak. He can poison you as well, like pretty thick. So the Sanfu Serum is very nice. This is a Super Restore combined with an anti-poison. At the bottom, I have a Divine Rune pouch with Cosmic Runes, Blood Runes, Fire Runes, and Soul Runes. This makes it so that I can currently cast like my Thralls, Dark Demon Bane, and Mark of Darkness. And then I do have the Book of the Dead for those Thralls. And then my max cape is for house teleports, really. You could just switch this out with a stack of house tabs. Yama is located in the Chasm of Fire, which is a dungeon in Zeah. There's a fairy ring code, DJR, that takes you super close to the entrance of the dungeon. And there's a bank chest very close to that fairy ring as well. There's some Chasm teleport scrolls, which are a drop that were released with this boss. At the moment, they are very overpriced. And that fairy ring is very close. So I highly suggest just sending fairy rings. If you don't have like the Lumbridge Diary and a good fairy ring teleport, it is fine to bank up at the chest just outside of the chasm before you go in. Once you enter the dungeon, make your way all the way to the bottom and talk to the voice of Yama to be able to get into Yama's lair. There are a couple of agility shortcuts at like 73 and 83 agility for those of you who have taken a lot of laps. Let's go over the base mechanics of the boss before putting it into a full fight. Yama can use all three combat styles. He's only going to use melee if you're standing in melee distance when he attacks. He also only seems to walk up to you if you're using a melee weapon or the melee combat style. So if you're using magic, you can just stand back and basically never get hit with melee. His magic attack will make a little ring of fire around your character, and then his arm will have some fire on it as well. While the range attack covers you in smoke a little bit, it's not as easy to see, but both of the range and magic attacks are reactable, so you can switch to the correct prayer after you start to see him use the attack. When Yama snaps his fingers is when it hits, so you have to click the correct prayer before he snaps. His magic and range attacks are predictable as well, though. He'll only switch between styles after he targets you with a special attack. So after he uses a fire special attack, he's only going to use magic unless you're standing too close and you get meleeed. And then after he uses a shadow special attack, he's going to switch back to range. This does work differently during the enraged phase. There are 5 glyphs in the room in a pentagon shape. In phases 1 and 2, he will charge up these glyphs to glow orange or purple. The orange glyphs protect you from fire attacks, and the purple ones protect you from shadow attacks. When you step on a glyph, it'll give you that protection for like 10 ticks afterwards. It'll then shut off that glyph for about 4 special attacks from the boss, so you do need to use them sparingly. only. If one player in the fight steps on the glyph, both players will receive the protection, so only one player needs to actually be doing the glyphs. In fact, if both players are stepping on the glyphs, you might find that you're using too many of them and then have none available when you need them later. Yama will target players with a shadow attack or a fire attack. It'll say in the chat which is happening, and there is a specific animation for each of them. These target attacks will hit pretty hard unless you go step on the correct glyph and get protected from it. The glyphs can protect you from the shadow wave and the fire wave attacks as well, but you're mainly supposed to be using them for the target attacks. Yama will release some shadow waves that will travel diagonally across the room, and you do have to step through them. Getting hit by these waves will do about 20 damage, and it'll turn off your overhead prayer. Other times he'll send a fire wave instead. These waves go horizontally across the room, and they tend to be a little bit easier to dodge. You don't really have to step through them. If you get hit by one of these, you'll take 16 damage, and it also sears you to the ground, so you can't move for a few ticks. Yama tends to alternate between these wave attacks, similar to how Vorkath alternates his specs. Sometimes instead of using one of those targeting attacks, Yama will spawn in some Void Flares. These Void Flares have about 140 health, and you will always max hit with magic on them. So if you use Mark of Darkness, which is a spell in the Arceus spellbook, and then you use Dark Demon Bane, you should be able to 2-hit these Void Flares. They do have a small timer underneath their health bar. When that timer fills up, they will explode, and they will heal Yama and damage you based on however much health they have remaining. It is possible to KO both Void Flares on your own as long as you are 2-hitting them, but these are clearly way easier to deal with if you do have 2 people in the fight. It'll spawn the same amount of Void Flares, so the 2 of you attacking them will make it a lot easier. While there are Void Flares out, Yama will not use a target attack, so you can focus on those flares, but just know that one of the target attacks is coming when that's over. When the fight begins, you're now in phase 1. Yama will spawn in the center of the room, and it will charge up the glyphs on the ground. The glyph in the northwest corner will always match his first special attack, or rather his first targeting attack, and then he's going to alternate between target attacks, so you just kind of go around the pentagon using the glyphs when he targets you, and you actually only need 4 of them, so you always have 1 extra one. His target attacks will either make a ring of fire or like a ring of shadows around him during this phase, and it will say something in your chat letting you know that it's coming. He'll change his attack style between mage and range after each target attack that he uses, and he will be alternating which wave attack that he uses as well. After you get Yama to about 1/3 health, he'll teleport you over to a mini Hallowed Sepulchre where you have to run across the rocks while the Judge of Yama uses fire spells. Then when you get up to the Judge, you will have to alternate between using magic and melee attacks on him to KO him. This can be done with a Voidwaker spec as well, which is kind of fun. He will start to use a 1x1 area of effect attack at your feet, so you do have to keep moving. You can step under the Judge, and he will send a flame at his feet, and it'll hit him, similar to how Araxor can hit itself during its enraged phase. Depending on what weapons you're using, trying to step under him to make sure he uses that attack could slow you down, so technically it may not be worth doing, but it is a fun mechanic to add in as well. Once you KO the Judge, you will be teleported back to the arena, and phase 2 begins. Phase 2 will work just like phase 1, but his target attacks are a little bit more dangerous. You still need to step on the corresponding glyphs to protect from them, but if you fail to protect yourself, they are going to punish you much harder in this phase. The shadow target attack will give you much less time to get to the spot, so you do need to be standing close to it early on. The fire target attack will spawn in a giant meteor, and it'll turn off your run while it's falling, so you do need to start close to that glyph as well. Again, these target attacks can be dealt with by one of the 2 players in the room. So if player A was targeted by the meteor, but then player B steps on an orange glyph real quick, player A will be safe. When you get Yama down to 1/3 health, he'll teleport you back to the Judge of Yama thing again. Make your way across the rocks, and then alternate between magic and melee attacks, starting with a mage attack. When you KO the Judge again, you're now going to get teleported into enraged phase. In the final phase of the fight, a lot of stuff happens, but you no longer need to step on the glyphs. Yama will throw rocks from the ceiling in groups of 3, and when they hit the ground, they'll make sort of an hourglass shape for where they're going to hit. He will always toss 3 sets of rocks in a row, and they're always going to be in the same pattern as well. Yama will also use the shadow waves still during this phase, and Yama will spawn a lot of void flares during the phase. It seems if you attempt to melee Yama at all during this phase, then he'll spawn a lot more void flares as well, so you're kind of forced into using magic. He will still use magic and range attacks as well, and he'll be alternating between the 2. Whichever type of standard attack that Yama last used in phase 2, he's going to use the opposite to start enraged phase, usually as his second attack of Enraged phase after he throws some boulders at you. Yama will then alternate between ranged and magic attacks, not including any attack where he throws rocks, uses shadow waves, or if he uses a melee attack if you get too close. So in the Enraged phase, after Yama uses a range attack on you, you want to switch to Protect Mage, and after he uses a magic attack, you want to switch to Protect Range. There is a pattern of his attacks at the end. The first attack seems to always be rocks, and then he'll swing with a standard attack while you're dodging those rocks, then another standard attack while like nothing's going on. Then he'll use the rocks again, usually accompanied by the waves, and then a standard attack during those rocks, and then one more standard attack after you're done running from the rocks. The next set of rocks that he throws likely is accompanied with Void Flares, and then he kind of seems to alternate between like rocks with waves, rocks with Void Flares. It can get kind of difficult at that point to be keeping track anyways, but there definitely is a pattern to it. Enraged phase is pretty intense, but the more you do it and the more you pay attention to the patterns and whatnot, and you get a better refresh rate, the easier it's going to be to react to everything that's going on. Yama's loot table doesn't seem to be too bad outside of the uniques, and the uniques are currently brand new, so they are going to be overpriced for a little while. I got a Soul Flame Horn like 4 hours in, and it did sell for 70 mil, and then while editing this video, it's already down to 42 mil. The Oath Plate armor is very powerful slash armor, so it's going to be expensive for a while. How expensive though, only time will tell, and we don't know the drop rates yet, as this is only day 1, so we'll have more loot information in the full guide once I get that out. If you enjoyed the video or you just got some useful information out of it, be sure to like and subscribe for more content. Also check me out on Twitch, which should be linked on the screen and in the description. Thank you for watching, and best of luck on your Yama gains.